Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to the Book Snob book tag. I saw this tag floating around on BookTube and I thought I'd give it a go as well. So if you want to check out the original video, I will link that down in the description, of course. But let's get into the questions. Question number 1 is Adaptation Snob. Do you always read the book before you see the movie? I have kind of a mixed answer with this question. So when it came to stuff like The Hunger Games, I'd already luckily read the books before I saw the films. But if it comes to young adult contemporary books, I don't usually read a ton of those. It's not my main go-to genre. So I didn't watch To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I haven't seen Love, Simon or Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I haven't read those, but I loved the movie versions of them. And I was the same with Let It Snow. I enjoyed that film, but I also haven't read that book. But when it comes to It by Stephen King, I had actually luckily read this for Spookathon in like 2018, I think. So before It Chapter 2 came out and It Chapter 1 came out, I'd just finished it. So this was just a lucky happenstance. I happened to have read this before the film came out. So I don't really plan on reading stuff before the movies come out, but if it happens, then that's great. If it doesn't happen, I don't care too much. Like, I'd love to watch His Dark Materials and I'm trying to listen to the audiobooks before I watch it, but if I don't finish all of the audiobooks and I watch the show first, I don't care. So basically, moral of the story is no, I don't have to read the book before I see the film version of it. Question number 2 is format snob. You can only read books in one format for the rest of your life, so I have to pick one. That's really hard. I've had a bit of a reading slumpy year, so I haven't read physically as much as I want to, which I mention a lot in my vlogs and stuff. And audiobooks have kind of been saving me a bit. So at the moment, I'd probably say audiobooks, but if you ask me again in like an hour, I'd probably say physical books. So it really depends. I don't usually read ebooks, so that's not too hard to say no to. This is a mean question. I don't like this question. I'd probably, if I had to choose one, I'd have to choose one. I have to choose audiobooks because some of the narrators I've listened to this year are just phenomenal, especially the narrator of the Lightbringer series. He was incredible. And then the narrator, I think his name is Steve Pacey, who does the first Law series. He just does all of the characters' voices so individually and so well. And he even gets the nuances right. Like one of the characters, Glockta, he has a lisp, and then he also has an internal monologue that he says as well. And then also the narrator has to have a separate voice to that. And he manages to distinguish each of those so clearly that I understand without question which one is speaking. So audiobooks with good narrators, that's where it's at. Question number 3 is ship snob. Would you date or marry a non-reader? I'm pretty lucky in that a lot of my friends and my partner all read, whether it's as avidly as me or not. Probably not. I'm just lucky that I know a lot of readers, I guess. Dave reads and I'm dating him. So if that's any consolation, I win this question. Question number 4 is genre snob. I have to ditch one genre, I think. If I had to ditch one, I would probably ditch historical fiction. Historical fiction is not really my jam. I was going to say poetry, but that's also a category, and there's tons of stuff within poetry. So I feel like I haven't delved into that category enough to say no. So I'd probably just say historical fiction because I know that it's not really my thing. Usually I'd go romance as well, but when romance is done right, I really like it. And I like romance in my books, but I just don't like it to be the overarching plot device that is driving the story. I like romance as kind of like a flavoring to the story. So I can't really rule out romance because I do enjoy it. And every now and then I might pick up a contemporary that has romance as the main focus, kind of just like a palate cleanser for fantasy and sci-fi. So I'd say historical fiction. Question number 5 is uber genre snob. You can only choose to read from one genre for the rest of your life. What genre do you choose? Oh man, okay. If I look at the shelf behind me, there's like a ton of fantasy here. There's a ton of fantasy here. There is a bit of manga behind me that you can't see. And there's mostly like fantasy here, although We Are the Ants has a little bit of sci-fi in it. I was going to say it's a toss-up between fantasy and sci-fi, but I think it's just straight up fantasy. I read a lot of fantasy. Question number 6 is community snob. What genre do you think receives the most snobbery in the bookish community? I don't know. Is it snobbery? I usually see a lot of snobbery when it comes to academia and reading for pleasure and genre fiction. So there's a lot of snobbery as a generalization against literary and genre fiction, because I know when I was studying my writing course, we were not allowed to write genre fiction because it was viewed as lower, which I think is stupid because every form of writing has some sort of merit. And also creativity is very subjective as well. So what might be literary or genre is still going to have value to at least somebody, even if it doesn't necessarily have value to you. So I still haven't set a genre. Just going on my experiences, when people ask me, oh, what do you do? And I say that I like to read as a hobby, they just assume that I'll be reading like women's fiction or biographies and stuff. And as soon as I say I'm a fantasy reader, they go, oh, not a negative way, just in a surprised way. So maybe fantasy, although I think the Game of Thrones TV show kind of paved the way for people when it came to fantasy reaching a wider audience. But I still don't think that enough people, at least that I've met, read fantasy. And I just want more people to read fantasy so I can recommend them all my favorite books, really. Also, when it comes to young adult books and adult books, when people ask me what I read and I say young adult, I kind of get this look like, really? You're 26. It's like, probably shouldn't be reading young adult. But no, young adult can be for anybody. My dad reads young adult books. I know tons of adults who read young adult books. So it's a category for teens and we should let them have that category, but also we should participate. And I think it's a really good way of staying in touch with pop culture as it's emerging. Young adult tends to have a lot of relevant issues in the news today, especially when it comes to just queerness and gender and sexuality and race and disability. Like, it has all of those touchstones in it. So I think ruling out young adult really cuts you off from learning about things from people with a new and emerging voice. Question number 7 is Snobbery Recipient, and it's, have you ever been snubbed for something that you have been reading or for reading in general? So I think I kind of answered this in both questions. So I'm just going to get off my soapbox now. Yeah, I have. But I think it just comes with people's general surprise. I've always been into action adventure stories and I've loved dinosaurs when I was little instead of dolls. So I've kind of grown up with people outwardly expecting that I will love dolls and romance and all that kind of thing. And while I don't hate that kind of stuff, it's just not my go-to. So I guess I've received snobbery for my interests rather than just for books, but it kind of goes into books as well because people get surprised when I read fantasy. But anyway, that is the end of the book tag. If you have been judged for reading a book, let me know in the comments. I've probably been crying on a train and an audiobook or something and people have side-eyed me, and that's also when I've been judged for reading, but they didn't know I was reading. For all they know, I could have just been listening to a sad podcast or something, or just had sad music in while I was staring forlornly out the train window. Who knows? Thank you so much for watching this video. I will chat to you in the comments and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.